race speed is going to cause the horse major problems. So they're scratching him for the Derby on Saturday. He'll probably be out of racing for a little bit. They'll do the surgery, and we'll see him back down the road. It's not a career-ending injury, but it is something that I've had horses that have had it. We've had to do things with it. Sometimes if you see a horse where they actually, you're looking at them and you're looking at the bit in their mouth and you can see their tongue hanging way out to the side, that horse wears what's called a tongue tie, where it's another thing designed to help the horse with his air passage, because sometimes horses will flip their tongue and cut off their air. And as you know, you can't run if you can't breathe. And these are different issues that you have to deal with horses. Something I'm all too familiar with, being in the game and having horses. But big news, and happened literally as we were taping this podcast, Omaha Beach out of the Kentucky Derby.
Holy cow, the favorite is out of the Derby. That is absolutely insane. Well, that's definitely going to change a few things. Most people should probably haven't put their bets down out, race days, usually when they mostly come in, but this is definitely huge news. I'm sure everyone's going to know this by the time this podcast airs, but I got to tell you, I am pretty shocked about this, and it sure makes this race a lot more interesting. And that leads up to my next question: how good is this field? I mean, with the favorite out, it's got to be it's going to even things out a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It changes a lot of things. Also, it's going to put another horse into the race that wasn't also eligible. Bodie Express is going to find his way into the Derby now. So we've got to add him into the mix. And it's for Mike Smith, if I'm sure you remember, Mike Smith had a choice. He was on two horses in the Derby, and there was a lot of talk about who he was going to take. Was he going to take Omaha Beach, or was he going to stay, loyal to Bob Baffert and stick with Roadster, number 17?
Right.
And he chose Omaha Beach over Roadster for his Kentucky Derby mount. And now, he's got no mount for the Kentucky Derby. Last year's Triple Crown winning jockey will be on the sidelines for the Kentucky Derby.
And that's too bad, because no one has ever won the Triple Crown and then go ahead and won the next Kentucky Derby too. So a huge blow to Mike Smith, and that is absolutely crazy. Is there any chance someone could, diss their jockey and put him on? I don't know if that would be tough. About the only way maybe would be if he picked up the also eligible horse, but that's a situation that could happen. He's never rode that horse before, but that doesn't mean that if you got a chance to get Mike Smith, you might try to do that. So we'll have to see what happens here in the next few hours. We'll see if the Baffert gods will be giving out forgiveness here. So that is definitely a huge thing for not only the top horse, but the top jockey that rode Justify last year. How important is post position in this 20-horse race? A lot of people sometimes scared of the rail or just hate being on the outside. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, it is definitely the 1 and 2 post positions are the worst post positions to have if you have a particular style of horse. And the particular style of horse is a horse that likes to be close to the lead. If you draw the rail or the 2-hole, you're going to have to gun your horse out of the gate and use a lot of them early to avoid getting the cavalry charge that's going to come from the outside. When these horses leave the gate from the outside and they're all jockeying for position because they don't want to be 20 wide, everybody wants to get to the rail or as close to it as quick as you can. Picture yourself as the horse that's down on the rail and you're looking up, you're in the ocean, you're on a surfboard, and that big tidal wave's coming at you. That's what it's like for the horses down on the inside in the Derby, with all of those horses coming from the outside, all trying to get to that first turn and be as close to the rail as you can. So if you don't leave out of there hard, you're going to get pinched down at the rail. You might have to, check your horse, and the term check is when you got to grab the reins on your horse because, you're running up on traffic And, it's just like driving on a freeway. You're rolling along, and all of a sudden there's a grandma in the passing lane, instead of in the other lane. And you can't swing around her because there's a car on the inside of you, or to the outside of you, and there's the rail to the inside. So you're stuck. What do you got to do? You got to slam the brakes. Well, that's what happens to horses, and then they lose their momentum. Right. So the 1 and 2 post position, not good for horses that like the front. And the 2 horses that drew the 1 and 2 hole both like to go to the, towards the front. War of Will's going to be in big trouble. Same with number 2, Tax. On the outside, if you have the 19 or 20 post position, it's the reverse a little bit. If you're a speed horse, you want to get out into the rail as quick as you can. The problem is when you're coming from the outside, if you don't get to the front quick enough, you're going into that first turn stuck 5 or 6 wide, and you're losing a lot of ground because the horses obviously that are closer to the rail, we all learned that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Well, in horse racing, it's not a straight line, it's an oval, and the shortest distance is to be at the rail, and if you're 4 or 5 wide, you're giving up ground that you've got to make up in talent to win the race that you're giving up to the other horses. So that's the problem with being stuck out there. The 2 horses that are stuck out there, the 19 and 20 horse, the 20 horse shouldn't be a problem for him because he is a closer, so he can just float out of there and try to get to the rail as quick as he can, find a spot that he wants. The 19 horse, though, Spinoff, is a speed horse. This is going to compromise him, his chances in the Derby, and it's one of the reasons he's 30-1. I think they'll have to use too much of him early in the race if they get him in the position that he likes to race.
Well, that's great information, Marco. And can you explain to our listeners how these post positions are picked for the Kentucky Derby and for all races? Do the horses with the most points get the best chance of getting a good position?
No, it's not. It's totally luck of the draw. As I said, it's the top 20 point getters, and how you earn those points are in the Kentucky Derby prep races, like the Florida Derby, the Santa Anita Derby, Bluegrass Stakes, Wood Memorial, all these races leading up to the Derby, these big races, horses accumulate points based on where they finished in the race. The top 20 horses get into the Derby. Now, once they're in those top 20, what they do when they're drawing post positions, there's 2 guys at the table that is doing this. One guy pulls out a sheet, and that sheet has a horse's name on it. The other guy has a bottle that has 20 pills in it, got 20 numbers. He shakes the bottle, they pull the name out, and they'll say Omaha Beach. And then the guy pulls the pill out, and that number that he pulls out, that's the post position for Omaha Beach. And they go through the 20-horse field. Now, there was a time, several years back, they were doing something where they let the trainers pick their post position. They still drew the names, okay? So it was still luck of the draw. But you drew the horse's name, and then the trainer would say, I want post position, if it was still available, 7. They could pick their posts, and almost always the last post position taken was post number 1. When they did it in that format. So, they tried to make it a little more exciting, make the trainers, hey, you got your wish. Out of all these post positions available, which one do you want? And, the best place to be in the Kentucky Derby, I feel, are between post positions 5 and 10. You're in the middle of the pack, so to speak. You're not dead middle of the pack, but you're enough off of the rail and enough inside of all the outside horses that you got a straight shot that you can decide where you want to be. 2 other post positions that have a little bit of a difference than any of the other post positions is post position 14 and post position 15. Because this is a 20-horse field, and most horse races in thoroughbreds, the maximum number of horses is usually 14. And that's all the bigger the gates are, or 14 stalls. So they have to bring in a second gate for the Kentucky Derby. They put the 2 gates side by side. But to bring the gates in, you've got to drag them in. So there's hitches on these gates that they pull with tractors. So when they put the two gates together, there's a little bit of a gap between the main gate and the auxiliary gate, meaning the last horse in the main gate and the first horse in the auxiliary gate, when they break, they're not actually side by side each other. So there's a little bit of extra room there. Normally that's a good thing because they have, less chance of getting bumped. Unless, and this happened 2 or 3 years ago, unless the 14 horse breaks to the right and the 15 horse breaks to the left, and then they bounce into one another.
Right.
With that extra, and it took 2 horses out of a race once. So that's the post positions, how they draw, and the post positions that are the best.
That is very interesting. I bet most people did not know about that 14-15 gate. That is absolute great information. Is there anything that surprised you from some of these prep races?
Well, I told you I did go to the Florida Derby, and Maximum Security is a horse that's undefeated coming into the Kentucky Derby. Nobody had heard of him. In fact, in his very first race, this is a horse that is racing for a $3 million purse on Saturday in the Kentucky Derby. But in his first race, you could have actually claimed him for $16,000. He was in a $16,000 claimer. This horse, they didn't have any idea of how good he was, or if they did, they were complete idiots in sticking him in a claiming race. He's won 4 for 4, but the first 3 races were all against, nowhere near Kentucky Derby type quality horses. He took his big shot in the Florida Derby. He had raced exclusively at Gulfstream Park, so he knew the track. He's never been anywhere other than Gulfstream Park. They put him in the Florida Derby, and he ran away with the race. And what I really should say is he stole the race. When I was there, I was sitting with a table full of guys, and we were having a great time at the Florida Derby. When they put up the half-mile time in that race, when I got to the half in 48 and 4, I immediately said, anybody that's got a closer in this race, you're dead. They're not going to get there. He went so slow that first half. Nobody went with him. He was left alone, loose on the front end, uncontested fractions, and he just basically slowed the race down to a crawl and stole it because nobody could close on him. No matter how good a horse is, they can only go so fast. And if you're a closer, you need the second half of the race to go a little bit slower than the first half of the race for you to make up all of the ground that you have to make up because you're way back there. Right. And because this horse went slow in the first half, he came home very fast, and his speed ratings are great because of that, but he wasn't tested. He will have more people challenging him in the Derby. They will not let this horse alone on the front end in the Kentucky Derby like he got in the Florida Derby, and then we'll really find out what kind of horse he is when another horse actually looks him in the eye and if he can stave that horse off.
So that's why his buyers is 102 coming into this Derby here. It was because of what happened in that Florida Derby that you were at. That is, and I watched that he did win by a long amount. Would make any novice horse better think that this might be the horse to play. But you made some great points here that he slowed the pace down. The closers couldn't make a move because they ran back and didn't have the speed to come up. I never thought of it that way. That is some great information. How important do you weigh these speed figures, these buyer speed figures you can find on rating this Kentucky Derby horse that is about 10 furlongs long?
Yeah, you look at the buyer speed figures are, they are part of the daily racing form, and that's the Bible for most people that handicap horses. There are some other publications that have their own speed figures, and they're all based. They try to get to the same end result, but they have different ways of figure them. Buyer is probably the most well-known. Time form is something that's coming up the last few years. Brisnet has their speed figures, but I look at the buyers, and what you want to see with the buyers is you want your horse peaking the first Saturday in May. Okay. You look at some of these horses and